Hey guys, another week, another crystal mission quest, and I'm still continuing the trend of maxing out the green crystals. And you've probably seen this party before, but really there's no need to change if it works, right? This is the party of Seymour, Iris and Rem, and it's a very effective party, not only because obviously they are all three green crystal characters, so they fulfill the requirements for the crystal room, but all three have turn manipulation as well, which comes into play especially at the later parts of the fight. This is going to be a 3-turn run overall, and it's fairly straightforward because luckily this week they gave us lightnings intersecting wheels. This stage doesn't have any HP triggers at all, so the only thing you need to concern yourself with is the force gauge triggers that the bosses have. So while I'm setting up with Rem and Iris, I guess I should just quickly cover the mechanics of this stage since we haven't had lightnings intersecting wheels for the longest of times. First off, before I continue further, here I'm using the Penelo call, which is a very unusual call to be used, but the main reason I'm using Penelo call here is for the base call rather than the LD call, because the base call gives HP Regen, but I'll cover more into that in a short while. So coming back to the force gauge triggers that the bosses have, at 30% the bosses will dispel all debuffs they have, including silver frame debuffs, and will grant themselves 8 frame buffs each. That's right, they'll fill up their buff slots to the max, which means that unless you dispel those buffs, you cannot land any new debuffs on the bosses. The easiest way to get around this is to use a call that can dispel. Here I'm using the Seymour LD call, which is probably the best because not only can Seymour call dispel all the buffs, after dispelling Seymour will also land his debuffs and will also delay all bosses by 2 turns, making setup much easier. If you don't have Seymour call, any dispelling call will do. You can use something like the pain call, for example, that can also dispel buffs, because the main utility that you want out of this is buff dispels. But like I said, the debuffs that the Seymour call lands obviously can't hurt as well. At 40% force gauge, the bosses will get an aura that reduces your max brave and your brave gains by 50%, which is a sizable penalty, but you can largely ignore it if you have PT auras across all 3 characters, as well as the Brothers Summon, which gives you 30% max brave up, so you'll notice a small dip in your max brave values, but overall it shouldn't hurt the damage too much. So for the most parts, you can largely ignore the 40% trigger. The last one is at 50%. At 50%, the bosses will get another aura that makes HP poison each time you take a turn, and HP poison value is 20% of your max HP. To balance off the HP poison, what I did is to stack HP Regen effects. Essentially, I'll regen and then I'll get poison, and then the next turn I'll regen again, so that I can keep myself healthy for the most part. This is where the Penelo base call comes in, and I'm also using the Lunafreya base call as well. Both these base calls do provide passive HP regen, and they both stack to counter the HP poison effect that the boss is having. So once I charge my force gauge with the potion pass from Iris, I end her turn using PT+. Sid Reigns is on the left hand side, party slot number 3, because he's using the Lunafreya LD call. This gives everyone in the party quick prayer. For Sid Reigns, you can then go into BT+ and then into FR to enter his force time. This also locks the bosses from further increasing their force gauge. In this stage in particular, the bosses don't charge their force particularly fast. They only gain 2% bonus per action, as opposed to the usual 4% that we see in recent stages. So it is actually very easy to win the force gauge race, and I think this is overall a faster strategy than waiting for the boss to hit 100% and then using force weakness to dispel the enemy's force gauge. You can use any force attack that is lightning elemental to hit force weakness, but I don't think it's worth it to aim for that. Even if the bosses hit force time, the only force effect in play is they do rainbow damage on their turn, and if they don't get turns, then it doesn't really matter at all. One thing to note is that if you're letting the boss hit force time, you must do so when they have 6 or less buffs in play, meaning that you do need to dispel the 30% buffs. Because while the bosses are buffed, they use a powered up version of their force attack, and that will dispel your buffs. Anyway, since I'm not even letting the bosses enter force time, all of that is irrelevant, and the bosses will die in this force time from seed rains as well. First off, before going into BT mode, I use 2 force echoes from Iris. There's no need to save it because you won't be using it at all later on in the fight. And then with Ram, I'm using 1 force echo to pass the turn to seed rains. This means that overall I'm saving 1 echo with Ram and 1 echo with seed rains, and this comes into play for the turn manipulation at the end of the fight. Here, the line that I took is to focus damage more on boss A. The reason is, there's no reason. I don't think it makes too much of a difference. If you want, you can also damage the bosses evenly. That should be fine as well. If I remember correctly, they both have equal HP, about 180 million each. But since this is the crystal quest, they get the 50% HP boost, so they should have about 270 million HP each. I guess if you are having trouble finishing off the boss in 1 force time, then you should be targeting force A as much as possible, because boss A is the one with the force attack. If boss B is the only boss remaining, then when it hits 100% force gauge, it will just enter into force time, but without using any force attack on you. So that is, I guess, something to consider if you're struggling to finish it off in 1 force time. If you are using the same party as me though, then there really isn't much to worry. You have quite a lot of leeway, so you can just choose to damage the boss in any sequence that you want. So while I'm finishing up with Seed Rain's BT mode, a little bit about my plans for the crystal rooms. I'm still sort of building on the green crystals. I'm not so sure whether that's the best approach for myself, but considering that green crystals, I have quite a lot of number of built up characters. But since I have quite a lot of built up characters that are green crystal, I think I can't really go wrong here. In future weeks, I might branch out to other crystal colors, I'm not too sure yet. But let's see how it goes and what crystal characters that we get in the near future. Coming to the end of the BT mode, if you are damaging one boss more than the other, I would recommend to leave the one boss with like 20 to 30% HP left, so that you can maximize on the splash damage from Ram's Force Echoes as well as the Brother's Summon, and don't let that splash damage go to waste. So that's why at this point I switched targets to boss B. The moment you exit BT mode, just pop summon. The idea here also is that entering summon mode here means I preserve the turn count at 3, and you don't really need to wait until you're at 999%, 948 is really more than enough to finish off the fight anyway. At this point, boss A is so low that it will die from splash, so just focus your damage on boss B, or if you're damaging the bosses evenly, you can just continue to do so. With Ram's Echoes, you want to target Seed Rains so that you pull him back. This is very important, and this also allows you to capitalize on Rain's Force Echoes. Seed Rains get a turn here, use his Force Echoes for massive damage. This is Force Echoes at 999% with his Seraphic Charge to boot. And here what you want to do is use his turn manipulation to pull Iris's turn back, because Iris can copy this damage with her EX. Finally, Iris gets her turn, just use EX here, targeting Seed Rains. This EX, even though it looks pretty cute in animation, is really killer. It will actually do even more damage than Seed Rains, because you still have the launch effect, and the extra launch from this attack will get boosted by the 999% for more damage. Here the boss is dead, but even if the boss isn't, Seed Rains will move next, and you can then use Seed Rains EX for still one more nuke at the end. So there is still really quite a lot of leeway here. Anyway, that's it for this week's Crystal Room. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you enjoyed the content, do leave a like, comment or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next Crystal Room quest. Bye!